All right, here we go. OverDrive, off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker. Brian Hayes and Jamie Noodles McLennan in here. The O-Dog's still doing panel work. Good to see you, though. You were in L.A. last night. What a scene. Had to go to overtime, of course. The Ottawa game.
And, of course, like, they lose to Anaheim the night before, which was just,
not good.
Not good. And then you're like, okay, you're concerned going into the game. It's like LA needs the points.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's back-to-back. I'm wondering if it's just going to be a smoke show. And Ottawa's, like, all over them the first half of the game. And I'm like, oh, no. Like, and then LA starts to get into it and dig in. And I'm like, God, this is going to be. Fair enough. It's 2-1. Ottawa's up 2-1. And then delayed penalty. Dubois scores 2-2. Then Mauvert scores his first career goal. Like 4 minutes left. I'm okay, no problem. And Ottawa ties it up to send it to OT. And I'm like,
of course.
My flight, it's 10 o'clock, like Pacific time. My flight's at 11:20. And I'm still we're going into overtime. So anyways, I left the rink at 10:12 and made an 11:20 flight.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
That means you weren't checking bags, I'm assuming.
No, and I was moving pretty quick. We had a car waiting, and I was doing the high step through the parking lot.
Yeah.
But I made it.
You made it. You made it.
We had a good day, even though I don't know how you felt because I haven't chatted with you in a couple days. Like, all the trades are, like, done.
I know. Well,
that's what was frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the big deals went down. Now, I will say the Tomas Hertl to Vegas deal right at the last minute is the craziest deal of the deadline because it came out of nowhere.
Right.
We knew Hannafin was going to be traded. We didn't know he was going to Vegas. He ends up in Vegas. We had a feeling as of yesterday Toffoli's going to move. Yeah. He goes to Winnipeg. You date back to Edmondson with the Leafs, Lyubushkin with the Leafs.
Yeah.
We knew Sean Monahan was getting dealt. We knew Adam Henrique, Wenberg was getting dealt. Like, all those guys we knew.
Yeah, they were preparing. The guys that sat out games. Like,
exactly.
Kind of figuring it out.
At no point did Tomas Hertl come up as a potential trade piece, considering he's injured right now. Why wouldn't he be? Long-term IR. Vegas acquired a long-term IR, and he's got, I think, 6 years left after this at $8.1 million. San Jose is going to retain 17% of the deal, I believe, so he becomes a $6.75 million player. He had to waive to go to Vegas, which he was happy to do. But Hertl, when he's healthy, is a really good player.
Really good. And all it does, you've been saying, like, they are mercenaries. It's
crazy, Vegas, the way they operate.
But all it says is you're looking at their UFA. It's like Martinez, Marcia.
See you later. See you later.
Doesn't matter. Like, we've already replaced you.
Yeah, you're gone. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate that Stanley Cup. Marchessault's been there since day one. Conn Smythe, day one guy. But thanks so much. Tomas Hertl is
But they
here
might
now.
find, like, that's the thing. They're so crafty, they might find a way. If they want Marchessault will be like, okay, let's do a team-friendly deal.
Yeah,
here. Let's sort this out. I want to stay.
Or he'll be on long-term IR all season. He'll sign a one-year deal. He'll blow his knee out when he signs it and says, I'll see you game one of the playoffs. Throw me on long-term IR.
They
don't stop. It's Bill Foley in his helicopter.
They are a machine.
I got to give them all the credit in the world because, like Vegas, it started with them. They danced circles around the league in the expansion draft.
It's true.
Circles around the league. They've been embarrassing many teams in the NHL since day one. And the crazy thing is they're barely in the playoffs. They're in the second wild card spot out west. They're not playing that well.
No.
They're really not playing that well.
But you saw the roster against the Leafs that night. There was 5 guys up from Henderson.
Yep.
They're banged up. Their decor are intact because we had Bruce Cassidy on. Cassidy's like, this is the first time we've had a healthy 6 on the back end. Our goalies are healthy, so let's see how this unfolds. And they kind of like hung on against the Leafs, but their firepower up front wasn't there. No Stone. Looks like Stone's done for the season. Eichel's coming back skating. You've got some players there, but you add a guy like Hertl where he's had knee surgery, but he's coming back, and
he'll be back game one, man. He'll be flying.
Yeah, it's true.
Flying. And if you're Edmonton, you're like, seriously, this is where it's going. If they end up playing maybe in the first round, or if they're a wild card team and it's Vancouver.
Yeah.
You've battled all year and
had a great season.
You're home ice, and who's rolling in? Tomas Hertl. There's Mark Stone doing
Anthony
stretches at center ice. Anthony Mantha they acquired.
Hannafin,
and Hannafin, that's 2 good. Like Hertl and Hannafin are really good players, and Mantha's a good player, but he's a depth guy even on Vegas. And we presume Stone will return early in the playoffs. So full credit to Vegas. They've been doing it since they stepped into the league. As from a Leaf perspective, we've got Brad Treliving coming up. Tree will join us in about an hour from now. And this was always going to be a fork in the road deadline. I've been bracing for the deadline they had for a couple of weeks. I'm not at all surprised. Yeah. In the end, they acquire Ilya Lyubushkin, Joel Edmondson, and basically under the wire Connor Dewar from Minnesota. And Dewar's he's a bottom six center / winger, not a big guy.
Yeah,
will fight.
Yeah,
a little bit feisty, kills penalties, but again, these are not high-impact players, and they kept their first-round pick. They kept Easton Cowan. They kept Fraser Minton. They kept basically all of their prospects, all of them. They did, and they kept that first-round pick. And I understand why Leaf fans, a big portion of that fan base, of this fan base, will be frustrated with that, and especially when you look at what Vegas is doing in particular.
Right.
Edmonton was active. Vancouver was active. Winnipeg added Monahan and Toffoli. Like, those are two good players.
Very good players. Yeah.
Very good players. So I understand the frustration with the idea that this wasn't big game hunting and the Leafs did not drastically shift their cup odds with these maneuvers. But I personally think this is the right approach. I would have been fine if they found a way to get high-impact players.
Yeah, the Tanev or Hannafin or something like that.
But that didn't seem like a reality. There seemed like there was something going on there. Calgary, the Leafs.
Yeah.
Also, what kind of assets the Leafs were willing to stomach to give up. And as I've said many times on this show, and we've all said, other teams are allowed to pay too. Other teams are allowed to say, no, we'll match that offer or better it. Yeah. And maybe Calgary liked Dallas's offer or Vegas's offer with Hannafin, whatever it happens to be. So if Hannafin and Tanev aren't coming here, then at that point you shift your focus and it was going to be depth pieces.
Right.
And I'm okay with that. And there's going to be heavy lifting in the offseason. I know you disagree and we looked at it differently. I don't love their team. I like their team. I love the way they were playing prior to this week, but I think they're this is Treliving and Shanahan saying, we've done heavy lifting. We've invested in these guys. You're going to have to do it on your own here.
I don't disagree. The one thing in looking at it, I come back to, it's like, okay, and I'm going to make the argument, but I'm also going to counter my own argument and tell you where I'm at right now today with the Toronto Maple Leafs. My argument the other day is, if you're going to be in for a penny, you might as well be in for a pound, because you don't want to waste Matthews in prime as far as him having a top-tier season this year, because there's no guarantee. If he has a 40-goal season like he did last season, then it's kind of, all right, he's having one of those, like an off season. So Willie's having a career season. Austin's having a career season. Mitch, his game's in order, as we all know. Mm-hmm. So I'm always thinking, for example, the guys in Vegas's dressing room are like, our manager's all in.
Yep.
Like, that's what it is. So the message. Now, I'm going to counter my own argument and say the one thing we targeted and talked about all season long is, I'd like that D to be upgraded and at least look like a National Hockey League defenseman core. They did that because they're heavier, they're longer and rangier on the back end and third pairing. Now, I know Benoit's been a nice find, but I'd
starting to slow down a little bit.
I'd like to see Edmondson in that spot.
Yep.
Who's a big 6'5", mean, long range, predictable. Yep. Lyubushkin, heavier player on the right side. So I look at it, depending on the way it's laid out on paper, that looks like a National Hockey League defense core. That's where before it was like, okay, hey,
William Lagesson,
yeah, and you got Benoit, and you got Timmins. Like, so it's patchwork, and we all love Gio, and Gio's still here, and he's going to battle for ice. But it just looks more. It looks better for me. And
right.
That's where I'm at. So if it wasn't going to be a home run, and hey, we're grabbing player X, okay, Brett Pesce or Hannafin, it looks like it's slotted better, and it looks like there's more balance. And all along, we've been saying up front, it was the Matthews show, was the Nylander show, and then a bunch of players. Well, now Max Domi looks like he's more alive. Tyler Bertuzzi, the guys that they brought in and they've expected to add the depth are playing better and playing. So really, when you look at it, there's more balance there. So that's where I'm at with the Leafs.
Yeah, no, I agree. They're not an elite defense core now. They're not. And again, unless you brought in Hanifin and Tanev, that wasn't possible.
Right.
It wasn't going to happen. And they're a good to very good team. They're not a great team. I'm not sure there is a great team in the league right now. Maybe it's Florida. Maybe. I love the way Edmonton's playing. Vegas, if they're healthy and they get to the playoffs, is obviously a team to be reckoned with. But I think the Leafs are somewhere between like 7 and 10 in the league in terms of a power ranking, which means you're a really good team.
Giving yourself a chance.
And you've got a chance, and they've been all in before. Yeah. And I know the way Toronto works is there is this, constant harping at you've got to give this away and give that away and go all in and get better and take advantage of prime. And this is your window. And been this long since you got a cup. I understand all of that.
Yeah.
But I've been a believer leading up to this trade deadline and certainly since it's expired that ultimately what still needs to be proven when the dust settles is can Matthews and Marner and Nylander and Tavares and Riley, can they elevate their game to a point where they can drag you somewhere?
Right.
Like through 7 playoff runs, they haven't proven that. Right. So even if you brought in Tanev instead of Edmondson, that question is still there.
Right.
It's still there. Even if you acquired Tomas Hertl, it's still there. Like you were not going to bring in players that were going to push those guys further down the lineup.
Right.
That was not happening. Your best players were going to be your best players before and after the trade deadline. And you look what happened this week. It could not have gotten any worse. I mean, let's call it what it is. We all started the show on Monday at 4 p.m. I came out flying. I was so excited for this week because of the trade deadline, but mostly because you got Leafs Bruins, 2 games, you're 6 back.
Got an opportunity
regulation.
to catch them.
You're right there. And not only did you lose, you lost 4-1, 4-1, which is a very triggering scoreline, as we pointed out. It's a horrible scoreline if you're a Leaf fan, 4-1, 4-1. And you just didn't elevate your play. Like I think there's I know there's an illness coursing through the room right now, and I don't know what to make of certain players not playing well. Yeah. Like I look at Austin last night. I thought Matthews maybe had the worst game of his season last night.
Lethargic.
He looked
probably
really off.
Fighting him.
Really off. And I thought he looked off the night before. Yeah. And I thought Tavares was off. I thought all of their best players had an off night last night. Yeah. But you're likely playing Boston. What happens in the regular season doesn't have to be relevant at all. But it's a team that has their number. It's a team that has their number, and the Bruins are going to play the exact same way you saw them play last night, the way they played Monday. That's what you're going to get in the playoffs.
Game 1.
Doesn't mean you can't beat them. Right. Doesn't mean you can't beat them, but that's what's coming. Like what you saw, plus an extra 50, 75%, 100% in terms of intensity, physicality. You know exactly what the Bruins are going to do. I know what Marchand's going to do. I know what McAvoy's going to do. I know what Pasternak's going to do. And again, regardless of who was coming in via the trade deadline, the question of what will Matthews do, what will Marner do, all that kind of stuff is still up in the air. And it was going to be the case at 3:01 p.m. Eastern time, regardless of what else Brad Treliving and company decided to do.
Yeah, I agree. Like Boston's a predictable team. Now they added the defenseman Peak from Columbus,
and Patrick Maroon. Patty Maroon comes in.
Little bite there.
I don't know if Maroon will play, but
he's been injured too, hasn't he? Been in Minnesota, so that's a depth piece, but that's a winner and a guy who's certainly has some bite to his game. I don't know. We've talked about it for all season long. Ryan Reeves today. Game 1 of the playoffs, does he play? Is he playing?
I'm not sure if he does. I mean, I think he probably will. Yeah. But if they go on a run, I don't think it's a scenario where he plays every single night. I'm a little bit surprised Nick Robertson's still on the team, quite frankly. I thought they were going to put Robertson up. Yeah. And I think, again, that speaks to them trying to keep their pieces together, trying to keep their young players.
Young cost control.
Their young cost control, their talent. Again, this will roll over in the summer. Even if they win, they go on some magical cup run and win, there's still going to be changes in the summer. If they lose, it could be drastic changes. And I do wonder, maybe I'm overthinking this, but is it the front office, putting the pressure at the feet of the best players that is not just the 5 core guys. It's also, McCabe is a part of that core now. Brody's a part. Even though Bertuzzi and Domi are on 1-year deals, they're relied upon and they're veteran guys.
Too.
Exactly. Like, you guys go out and lift up all the boats here.
Yeah.
But Robertson's still here. I find that intriguing. And Brad Treliving spoke about 20 minutes ago and gave a positive update on Matthew Nyes.
Yeah.
Said he should be fine. They think he'll probably play in Montreal tomorrow night. But that's another one where, of course it's Marchand. Like, of course it's him.
Yeah.
And I agree with Keith's assessment after the game that he just saw him coming and braced.
Yeah. But
that's him in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Like, always prepared, and he's like, I'm not getting hit.
Yeah.
So I'll take you out. Like, it's not like I didn't throw an elbow, but he got ready and he was flying and he's compact.
Yeah.
And that's him in a nutshell. And then you can chase him around all you want. He could not care less.
Yeah. That's what he does best.
Yes.
And he's actually better when he's engaged. He's one of those players that if you let him sleep, like, he kind of can fall into the weeds.
Which happened Monday.
Right.
He slept.
Wasn't
his game.
Super impactful player Monday night, but man, he comes to play. Big moments and Pasta's right there. Like, Boston's the one thing in going into, coming off the Buffalo game, but also reading Jim Montgomery's comments when they lost to Edmonton. He was not happy with the way that Boston checked. And I made a little mental note of that comment because that's something where that's a direct shot at his group saying, didn't like the way your details away from the puck and the way you competed on pucks. And I kept thinking to myself, well, it's bad timing for the Leafs because that's going to be a low-scoring game because there's going to be no time and space out there. And I think of the Frederick goal where Willie wants to turn.
Yeah, can't do it.
And Frederick's on him like that. And it's just time and space, and I'm going to go through you if I have to. That's how Boston plays. And away off to the race. Didn't love 5 holes, kind of a weird change-up shot
got
type
it off
of thing.
Quick. And
got it off, surprised the goaltender. But, that's where little plays like that, where every piece of ice is challenged, Boston's going to do that.
Yeah.
They showed you last night. It is going to be ramped up in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, and Montgomery said after the game he really liked the Bruins' physicality, and he said he thought that they set that tone early and it benefited them. And then with the Leafs, they got physical when it was too late.
Yeah.
And that's the story of the Leafs where I think, if you're a Leaf fan last night, you're like, okay, if you're going to lose, go out with a fight, take a chunk.
Yeah, take it.
And I think that's positive. It certainly can't hurt.
Yeah.
Like, there's no downside of Bertuzzi fighting Witherspoon. There's no downside of Domi going at Marchand, going at McAvoy. Why not?
Yeah.
And Reeves is out parading, seeing if anyone wants a piece. Go for it. Like, by all means. But what I think is long overdue and what has to be established at some point is the Leafs can't constantly be reacting to physicality.
Yeah.
You got to get proactive. You got to initiate. Like, I can't recall the last time I was like, wow, that other team's going to try to kill the Leafs because the Leafs are all over them. Yeah. And the Leafs threw a big hit. And the Leafs dropped their gloves and jumped the guy. And the Leafs were starting to scrum. And the Leafs ran the goalie and were like, what are you going to do about it? With the Leafs, it's generally like, okay, we'll get there if you drag us there.
Right.
But if you don't, we'll go down that road too, and we'll just play, the way we're comfortable. And that's where, again, we keep having these conversations, team toughness, what's it worth, the physicality. And it's worth something for sure, because the alternative is you just whimper away, and that's never a good look.
No.
But the idea that it's reactionary all the time, and Domi coming on after, we made a pact, like that, no one wants to hear that. Like, why are you addressing that? Why are you saying that? Why do you feel it's necessary to even reveal that to the world? Like, if you've made some pact, keep it to yourself. I don't think that's what Leaf fans want to hear.
I thought that was a bit weird.
I think it's them trying to convince the world that, because they've run into this before, their history, their reputation,
right?
Liljegren, Marchand earlier in the year, they've run into it where it's like, we want to prove that we're team tough, that we stick up for each other, which is imperative. But if you have to announce it to the world, you're basically asking the world to question,
right?
The legitimacy of it,
or
how consistent it is.
Hey, we've made a pact where a lot of teams are like,
goes without saying.
Goes without saying. This is just how we play. This is how we're going to react to certain things, or we're going to be proactive. So, yeah, instead of the lip service, you just got to do it. That's really what. But some of the new players in Edmondson, he's got that in his DNA. Like he has some bite. McCabe has some bite. There is some players. Lyubushkin will play physical. Domi will be in there. Bertuzzi will be in there. Ultimately, you need all of that team toughness, but you need your top players to push through. When things are tough, they got to push back. They're not fighting. They're not going to, but they can be physical. They can step out of their comfort zone. How many times do we see Connor McDavid all of a sudden involved or, laying a hit? We know Draisaitl welcomes physicality. That's where and again, Mitch Marner does not have to run anybody, but he better win a loose puck battle when it matters.
Well, that's exactly it. And that's
the difference.
It's never been about you got to drop your gloves and fight a heavyweight to prove something. This isn't a prison yard.
Yes.
It's you got to be rugged and on pucks and not easy to push off. And if you get pushed off, you're coming right back.
Yeah.
Like those are the type of details that are going to matter in the end. And, the Leafs, they generally do that pretty well. They got to do it better, and they've got to establish it consistently. And once we get to the playoffs, that's where we're at.
Yep.
Connor Dewar is a Maple Leaf. He's a bottom six, can play center of the wing, was in Minnesota. He's coming up here. He'll be a Leaf. Edmondson, obviously a Leaf. Ilya Lyubushkin, he's a Leaf. William Lagesson was placed on waivers and claimed by Anaheim. But Matthew Knies sounds like he's going to be okay. Nick Robertson is still a Leaf as of 3 p.m. So those are your moves. And I know it's not flashy at all. It's very bland, quite frankly. It's just patchwork stuff. I would remind you, the Florida Panthers last year literally did not make a trade. Literally did not make one trade. And this time last year, people were like, I wouldn't either because look what's going on with them. And then they flipped the switch. They went on a run. I'm not predicting that for the Leafs, but it was their best players that did that, a goalie that got hot.
Yeah.
That was still going to be the case at 3:01 p.m. Eastern time for the Leafs, that availability to them. Do you have the guys that can drag you there? They weren't going to acquire that at the deadline. But we'll ask Treliving. We'll get to his take at 5. Like, why only these moves? Why didn't you put more assets on the line?
Yeah.
Nick Robertson, get you an update on Knies. What did he think of his team against the Bruins? Did that factor into anything? Like just 1 or 2 games leading up to a deadline, does that factor into your assessment and what you're willing to give up?
I think it's a full season assessment, but you're right. Like in small sample sizes, if you're like, okay, looking at this week, if you are game planning for a certain team, if you know you're on a collision course, now there's a chance that Boston drops, Florida's there or Boston overtakes. Now, Florida, I believe, lost last night, right? So it's, I think they're a 1 point separated.
Yeah, they are. And Florida's got a game in hand, but it's only 1 point.
Yeah, so they're, that's going to be a dogfight right to the end of the season.
Absolutely.
So, it's you can't game plan just for Boston, and then all of a sudden Florida comes out of nowhere and drops down, and you're like, okay, let's go at it here again. You're worrying about your group, and I come back to it. Top players and depth. Do you have depth up front? I think they believe they do. Now you're looking at depth on the back end, at least with some, I call them NHL players, or everyday NHL players, which a guy like Edmondson is one. He's played in the league. He's hard to play against. Lyubushkin, same type of thing. He hasn't won anything, but he's more of a steady, physical, stay at home. Now it's going to have some internal competition. If Benoit wants to try and push somebody out, if Giordano wants to push somebody out, you do have at least some depth there, and now it's that internal competition to see who's going to play.
Exactly. And they've got, 18, 19 games left to figure that out.
Yeah.
All right, Brad Treliving is coming up just after 5 o'clock. We're going to have different people join us throughout the afternoon from TSN, recapping what was a somewhat busy day. I mean, there were so many deals leading up to this day. I think it was somewhat predictable that there weren't going to be a flurry of trades. Yet, Tomas Hertl going from San Jose to Vegas right at the last minute was very, very significant. And again, the Leafs made one deal today. Connor Dewar is a Leaf. He's coming in from Minnesota. So more on what happened throughout the afternoon. Brad Treliving coming up. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. OverDrive continues. Brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Brad Treliving coming up in about a half an hour. The GM of the Maple Leafs, Bryan Hayes, Jamie Noodles, McLennan, Frankie Corrado joining us around the table. Frankie, it seems like Vegas has just stolen every single headline this week. it started with Mantha. They picked up Anthony Mantha, and then Noah Hannafin, ostensibly out of nowhere, although we knew that Hannafin was going to be dealt. We just didn't see Vegas necessarily in the crosshairs. But Tomas Hertl was not on anybody's radar.
Oh, furthest thing.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, not only is he on the radar, of course, he goes to Vegas.
And he's on
he's on long-term IR right now.
Right now. This is the thing with the whole Vegas and what they're doing. Everyone, people don't like it. It's circumventing the cap, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of risk involved, don't you think? They're a little more comfortable taking on that risk than other teams.
Yes.
Your team can do it too, but there's a lot of risk involved. And we talked about this morning, Brian, where it's the only reason why this is really becoming a thing is because they won, because Tampa won. Because if that blew up in their faces, we'd be talking about and saying, what the hell are you doing? That's the dumbest thing ever.
And you got to be able to you got to be able to take the risk, but that's money out of your pocket, real money out of your pocket. Hertl's got 6 years left at 6.75. So Brian and I were talking before you came on. That means somebody's gone this summer. If Hertl's going to be healthy for the next 6 years or whatever next season, somebody from your core is out the door. Doesn't matter whether it's Marchessault or
He's
name
a UFA,
Wild
right?
Bill.
Marchessault's a UFA.
Yeah, I believe he is.
Will Carrier's a UFA. Alec Martinez is a UFA.
See you later.
But
Thanks
these
for
are
everything.
Cutthroat.
Yeah.
That's how they operate there.
Unless they come back and they say, we've got this amount of money for you to come back.
Yeah. And a long-term IR stint. You got to go on long-term IR. For
Either way.
Mandatory. Team initiation.
Yeah.
LTIR.
Good on them. I know people get pissed off about it, but it is still within the rules, even though it's circumvented. There's still, if you don't want that to happen, change the rules.
Let me ask you guys something. Last year, we knew Matthews was hurt. It wasn't a big secret. He had a down year because of it. He was probably banged up enough that you could have enough of a paper trail that you could have put him on LTIR. Mm-hmm. Did that ever cross anyone's mind here? Because going back to the risk, what's the risk of not having that? And it's different, Matthews and Mark Stone. But what does Mark Stone mean to Vegas?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot.
So that's what I'm saying. If you got guys that are banged up, you can do it. It's just they are willing to take that risk way more than any other team.
You got to stomach it. In terms of other deals today, I'd say Tyler Toffoli kind of kickstarted the party, going from Jersey to Winnipeg.
My whole question is, if Jersey's trying to make the playoffs, they traded their top scorer. Not Jack Hughes has more points. Tyler Toffoli, I believe, has scored the most for that team. I think he's got 27 goals, I believe. Yeah. I was checking this morning. So, what's Jersey doing? They acquired 2 goalies. I just saw that they grabbed Kakkonen right at the deadline here.
Yeah. Did they trade Vanacek, though? Is that
for Vanacek? But Vanacek hasn't, I think he's been injured and inconsistent.
Yeah, he's not playing.
So, you've got 2 new goalies in Jake Allen and Kakkonen, and they're saying, we're going to do this by committee and put both those kids down and let them play.
What does that do for Markstrom now? I don't see, I think Markstrom's done now. Not Markstrom's done, but New Jersey, they probably went down that road long enough, and they're like, I've seen enough here. We're going to make our contingency plan.
Now you can readjust this summer, though. And the other thing I would argue is if Jacob Markstrom and the Flames, if they want to trade him, they're going to have to ask him to broaden his team list. Because it sounds like, almost a little bit like the Tarasenko situation where Tarasenko said to Ottawa, trade me to Florida. So Florida's like, yeah, we'll give you, third rounder, fifth rounder.
Right.
You want to come here.
If you were LA, would you not make a serious push to get Jacob Markstrom?
You would, but it's got to be dollar in, dollar out. And Jacob Markstrom, if he does not want to go to LA, he goes, no, because he's got a full no-move clause.
Yeah. I kind of if he was willing to go to Jersey, how are you not willing to go to LA?
You would think,
right?
Jersey to LA, you're going to get me in trouble because I'm going to carve Jersey. But I mean, listen.
Jersey is New York, basically. Let's call it
that's the thing. Let's call it Hoboken.
That's a good point because I think there was a report on Allmark, right, in Boston and them possibly moving him and, he didn't want to go somewhere. And that's it. Jersey, yes, it's Jersey, but you're 20 minutes from Manhattan.
Yeah.
Literally.
You're not far.
Literally.
You can live in New York and play for the Devils.
Absolutely.
It's like being the Ducks. Okay, yeah, you're in Anaheim, but you can be in LA. You can be on Sunset in a half an hour if you want to.
Yeah.
So And Jersey, it's been a disappointing season, but I think the belief is at some point they will turn that around, right? But you bring up a good point. You got these goalies, you've fired your coach, you're hoping for a spark, and then Toffoli goes.
Yeah.
And Toffoli has played for almost every Canadian team now. Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, now Winnipeg. This guy's been all over the map.
Yeah.
He is a suitcase, Toffoli. He's been everywhere.
But
Starting in LA.
Yeah, suitcase, but a guy that I think.
But that's coveted.
Yes,
Like, not
guys
like
want
get him out. It's that, like, if you throw his name out, teams are like, we will take Tyler
we'll take that
Toffoli.
guy, yeah.
Like, I like the move a lot by Winnipeg.
I love it. I think Winnipeg looked at what Colorado did, and they made a change in the middle of the ice that was really important for them. They can't, like, Colorado was probably more of like a one-line team. Yeah. Now they're going to be deeper, and Winnipeg looks at that. They looked at what Dallas did. They get Chris Tanev, and they're thinking, well, we got to go through those teams. So we got to do something here. They pushed more of their chips in than maybe we would have thought.
Where are you guys? Like, I thought Colorado was the most significant changes because, like, when you look at it, like Middlestead going there, Johansson out, like just and Phillips
that was
like
such
get
a
the
bad
hell out of
fit.
here.
Yeah. Such a bad fit right from day one.
Torts wasn't working with Ryan
Torts is
Johansson.
like,
no way.
You go away.
Yeah.
But it just, I don't know Middlestead enough. I've seen him enough. I think we've all seen him. I don't know if he slots as a second center.
That's
to me,
what they're
he's more
hoping
of
for.
a 3.
Yeah.
And Bowen Byram, like I thought Buffalo got, I think Byram's a better player than Middlestead. But he's had injury issues. That's the problem with Bowen.
Right. And and then you bring in Sean Walker, who's, he's a good piece, but he's a depth guy.
Yeah.
Depth
He's like Byram light, like just maybe
right-handed
a step
shot.
under.
But I looked at Colorado. I'm like, these guys aren't messing around, though. They got the Duhaime kid from Minnesota, who's a tough kid, plays hard. And it's just, they're reshaping their team. It's like, it's a 5-pack, isn't it? I think there was 5 guys there where we saw the Leafs at the deadline I don't know if it was last deadline or previous
Last year
deadline.
was 6 guys they brought in.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of turnover. It's asking a lot.
It's a 30-year team.
Doesn't it show you how desperate Colorado was to get some help in the middle of the ice?
Yeah.
Like they saw that as a significant deficit. Like think about what Dallas offers down the middle of the ice.
Right.
Think about like what Winnipeg, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's matchups there that they were going to lose going into a playoff series as much as McKinnon and Rantanen are unbelievable.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's the that's kind of the reality of what happened out west is all the big teams, and there's probably been 6 all year, maybe 7 if you include LA, if they feel like their goaltending has been solidified here. But Dallas, obviously, they made moves.
Yeah.
Winnipeg made moves. Colorado made moves. There's 3 in the Central right there, like 3 good teams.
Yeah.
And 2 of them are playing each other in the first round. Then you go to the Pacific. Vancouver made moves. Edmonton made moves. Vegas made a ton of moves. And
LA didn't do anything.
LA didn't do anything.
Oh.
But
so
they need, like watching that game last night, LA, like I think they're looking at it saying, we need our players to play better. We need our goaltending. We need our defensive structure to play better. Now, Kempe didn't play last night because he's injured. But I think they more look at their goaltending. This Byfield's a player.
Oh, yeah.
Watching
He's
him live
arrived,
last
man.
night,
Yeah.
man, is he a player. He's big. He moves well. He's got good hands. Got a little bite to his game. He can be physical. Like, he's a serious player. Like, I think LA could surprise people. But the X factor is the guys they have on the roster. It's PLD.
yeah, who there were some reports today they're trying to get rid of.
Yeah.
Who's taking that on?
But like, if that guy wants to play.
If he wakes up, Pierre-Luc Dubois
like,
is a
this guy is
player.
an absolute beast.
Yeah.
You've got Deneau. You've got Kopitar. Like, they're deep down the middle. You've got grizzled vets like Trevor Lewis in there, still chipping away. And still, like, they are a team. That Andreas Englund, is an absolute beast. Like,
He's my old D partner in Belleville.
He's
a great guy.
He's an animal.
He's nails.
He's an animal.
Yeah, he's undercover nails.
like-
we used to joke around because, like, best teammate, best guy, would do anything for you. Drop the gloves, big hits,
Yeah.
10-foot pass,
Yeah.
grenade.
Yeah, can't do it.
Grenade.
Just exploded, eh?
But-
funny.
But just like the best guy. But LA, like, they were so good to start the season. And then I felt like what made them good almost became their crutch where it was like, we're just going to hang back and be this 1-3-1 team. And it's like teams kind of figured it out. And I don't know if they're doing anything a little bit different, but they can't sit back and rely on, we got to be the 1-3-1.
Yeah.
Like they actually have to go get the puck a little bit more.
I saw 1-2-2 yesterday. They looked a little bit more aggressive on their forecheck. They were lethargic. I was telling Hayes, like, Ottawa looked like gangbusters the first 30 minutes of the game. And I was like, this is exactly, like, where was that against Anaheim? Although Anaheim, they did create 19 high-danger chances. The no-name goaltender.
There he is, man.
From the Toronto Sun.
Yeah. He's done it multiple times this week.
He was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, he had the 52 saves in the penalty shot goal.
Against Jersey.
Yeah, against Jersey. He stole that game.
He did it against the Devils.
He's a good goaltender. But, it just, LA shifted. You could feel them coming on. That Fiala's a good player, too. Like, they've got some players there. But to your point, Brian, everybody kind of strengthened, or at least was like, okay. And it speaks to the league going, there isn't a clear-cut one. There's nobody running away with the league. So every team's going, if we can tinker, we can add a little bit here and there, maybe we're the ones who go on a deep run.
Yeah.
Maybe we're the one. And I think there's probably about an 8-pack of teams that feel like they could be the ones that go on a deep run.
Yep.
What'd you think of Carolina's day?
Aggressive.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I guess it started technically last night with Gensel, right? I mean,
that's part of today.
I got 5. Wasn't it Bunting and like 4 other prospects?
Yeah, and I think a couple picks in there too. Not a first-round pick though. I think there's a condition on the second.
There's a condition on the second.
If they win the cup.
I think the Kuznetsov thing is very interesting.
Yeah,
it feels like it does feel like he was probably mentally checked out in Washington. I wonder if he's in a situation now where the team actually has a legitimate chance and they're going to rely on him. If that sparks something in him where he's like almost snaps out of it and gives them.
He is
like the
uber
full
talent, man.
Like gives them the full package of what he is. Like we know what he is. He's not going to be defensively responsible, but you surround him with those guys, and he's got a high ceiling offensively. Now all of a sudden Jake Gensel's there. Like he's a guy who can score in the playoffs almost at will. It seems like.
You know what though? We talk about it all the time. There's teams. That's a good team, but you're like, who is the top end difference maker talent, right? Because that's really what. You can add players at the bottom of your roster. Your stars are going to deliver. With Carolina, Aho, I would say, is a star.
Yep. Svechnikov closing in on it.
Who they missed in the playoffs last year.
Certainly missed. But it's
now Gensel and Kuznetsov.
It's a bunch of good players, right? Yeah. There's a bunch of good players with a great coach.
Really good defense,
them,
too.
Good D. The goaltending's been suspect. But now all of a sudden you add some name brand and some depth there in the Gensels, Kuznetsov. It's top-end talent. And then you add it into that. Because they're looking at the Rangers adding players. You're looking at the teams around, and saying, how are we going to beat these teams in the playoffs? Well, you need depth and you need scoring. I wonder how Kuznetsov will react or how Brind'Amour will be with him too, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's
because Brind'Amour is a guy like,
he won't put up with cheating.
Exactly. I need to see my guys working hard through the puck here. We need to play. But that's up to the coach.
It's interesting, again, how every market is going to react to what their own team did or what other teams did. And again, in Toronto, a lot of Leaf fans are probably unhappy that there wasn't a more impactful deadline and more assets weren't traded off to bring in more impactful players. And meanwhile, you look at Florida, who they haven't won a cup. I know they were in a cup final. I understand that. But they picked up Tarasenko, Oposo. What am I missing? Like, it was more like just veteran guys that wanted to be there, and their respective teams, Ottawa and Buffalo, said, fine, we'll send you down there. Like, depth, vet guys, those aren't game changers. Like, Tarasenko's a good player. Oposo's, they've had great careers. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, those would be more impactful players.
Yeah.
But it's like veteran guys who are going to come in and insulate the top end and find a role somewhere, probably third line, fourth line maybe. But it's all good because they're playing so well, and they went to a cup final last year. Boston didn't do much. I think it was Frank Saravelli reporting, I guess, that Allmark to the Kings was possibly on the table, and it didn't cross the finish line. But Boston picked up a couple players.
They're like Patty Maroon.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing,
but
with
nothing
Florida,
like massively impactful.
No, they got the
Tampa,
defenseman peak. That was the only one.
and he's tough.
wasn't,
He's
he
big.
wasn't even playing. Zaboral wasn't really playing. So
and Tampa didn't really
saw
do
that
much.
off.
So, like, again, you look at Detroit, didn't really do much. Like, you look at the division the Leafs are in. The Leafs were as active as the other teams they're competing with right now.
I think with Florida, like, the bones are so good there. Like, and the guys that you bring in, you're not going to ask them to do too much, right?
Yeah.
Like Tarasenko, just do what you've been doing
Plug
in
and
Ottawa
play.
this year,
Plug and
right?
play.
And that pushes someone lower in the lineup. And Okposo is just a good veteran guy who will give you, if he plays 11 minutes, he's going to give you a hard, honest 11 minutes. And there's probably some offense there lower in the lineup.
Quality person, too.
Yeah.
Like, you start looking at like how these people are going to fit into like your room and all of that. Oposo's a captain. He's a leader. He's a guy that, they want in the room. And by all accounts, and talking and, called that game in Florida a couple of weeks ago, like that's a tight room. That's a group that, went through the war last year. They wanted it to continue this year. But you're right. It wasn't like the teams right around the Leafs were just getting 5 and 6 players.
No, I know. Exactly. Like, no one really loaded up within the division. The Rangers, I would say, on the other side. Carolina, clearly on the other side.
Yeah.
But in terms of Florida, Boston, Tampa, Detroit, there's likely 5 teams going there from the division, although the Islanders aren't done yet.
They're
like, Patty
sniffing.
Waugh's got that team cooking all of a
But
sudden.
what did they do?
Nothing. That's the thing. They fired their
Feathers.
coach.
They don't
I
do
know.
anything.
But
Like,
like,
they
I
never
was
do
like,
anything, the Islanders.
Nothing. The Islanders didn't do anything today,
Right.
did they?
Exactly. And I guess, I know I keep reiterating this, and I know a lot of Leaf fans don't want to hear it, but Stanley Cup didn't get handed out at 3 p.m. today.
Right.
There's still a lot of games left. It's going to be a long run. We'll see what comes of it. All right, Frankie, good seeing you, man.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
There's Frankie Corrado. Brad Treliving coming up in about 15 minutes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, trade deadline on TSN Radio, brought to you by your Ontario Subaru dealers. Subaru, confidence in motion. We've got Brad Treliving coming up in about 10 minutes. Get his take on the deals that the Leafs made, the deals they didn't make, the players that stick around, the assets that stick around, what he saw out of his team the last 4 days, twice against Boston. It didn't go well, but they're still going to the playoffs. They're in Montreal tomorrow. They're a good team.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically what he's probably going to say is he believes in this group. That's why he didn't mess with it too much.
Yeah, I would assume that's coming. We'll see what else he's got to say about what came out of today and why he feels these moves were necessary and why he thinks the team's in a better place to succeed in the playoffs today compared to maybe where they were a week ago. Brad Treliving coming up in the next hour. OverDrive continues, TSN 1050 and on the TSN app.